Okay, so good morning everyone, and welcome to the last lecture on software testing. So today on our agenda is that we're going to discuss the current assignment and also the next assignment. So I think that, or at least I've heard from some students that they have some questions regarding their test plans and how to tell this this test plan story. How big is the test plan gonna be? Can we use the templates? If we use the template, we think that large part of the templates does not fit. Can we remove that part? And what I want for the test plan is that you should do an intelligent work of writing a test plan. So in order to do that, you need to think of what is a good way of testing this product. And first off, if you don't know how a web server works, then you need to address that, because that is a risk, right? So you need to mitigate that risk. Perhaps you need to read up on how a web server works. Perhaps you need to work a bit on trying to understand how to start up the web server. Perhaps you need to read up a little bit on what standards the web server is gonna fulfill and stuff like that. So you're probably gonna realize this is a huge task, and you got a limited amount of resources for that huge task. So depending on how many you are in your project, I expect different magnitudes of these test efforts, right? So if you're a large group with 4 students, I expect more work to be done than just a single student. So, and then one of the most important tasks that you will do here is to prioritize. So you will come up with a test strategy first, probably. And this test strategy should be like, how can I test this product? First of all, over the entire project. So let's imagine that we have some kind of project, and I have not specified so thoroughly the project, and you don't know the developers. Oh, it's me. But you don't know how large this is, what kind of budget there is in this. So you fill in these gaps. So you imagine okay, we are some kind of company developing this product, and you can imagine whatever you like, right? It could be realistic, it could be totally unrealistic. But you're in charge of completing and think of a test strategy for this project. And there's a lot of things missing in this project. There is some documentation, some requirement specification, and your job is to understand if this specification is fulfilled by the product that you've received as source code. In order to do that, there are other risks, right? So you need to understand how to run this web server. You need to understand how to start it up. What kind of arguments do I need to send to it in order to start it up? How can I build this? What kind of dependencies does this product have? All of these things are risks, right? And depending on your knowledge, these may be huge risks or small risks, right? If you're very used to take a random source code from internet and start up that project, then if you're used to that and you know the sort of problems that can occur, then you probably don't think of it as a big risk, right? But it could be that this web server has some kind of dependency that you just don't know. So you need to come up with some kind of strategy on how to work. And I would probably say that, okay, I'm probably going to need to spend a couple of hours in the beginning of this test effort just to learn the domain and just to do some exploratory testing using this product. See how it works, how it's supposed to work. I need to read up on these documents. And when you have that knowledge, the second part of that would be to write a test plan for for the current iteration. And think of what am I going to test now, and what am I not going to test now. So you can, a good test plan would be specifying the test effort for the entire scope of the project, but you're not going to do all that testing now because you don't have the resources, right? So then you need to think of, okay, how much resources do I have? Okay, maybe 20 hours or something like that. What can I do that will give the most bang for the buck during 20 hours? Okay, well, there are some requirements in the specification of the assignment, right? I want to see a test plan document. I want to see some test cases written. I need to see a test report. Okay, so at least we need these 3 artifacts. So some of that time I need to write not unit tests. I need to write tests. And the other part I need to write all this documentation, and then also I need some part of actually doing the testing, right? So divide your time into these activities and then execute. Then you do this. And sort of you need to come up with these test reports. But it's not in an ideal world, you would, in the test report, find all the problems there is in this web server. And there are a lot of problems. I mean, I've introduced some problems, and there are some problems that just are mistakes on my behalf when I wrote it, right? And perhaps you can find problems that sort of occurs because we don't have enough documentation for this product, right? Yes, stop.
Writing test reports, test cases for the requirements and use cases you have specified. It's easier because I guess you want us to discover and explore this application and take. Do you want us to try to evaluate parts that isn't specified, how it should work on the application, and write test cases to that as well?
Okay, so this is asking me if there are certain parts of this that should be in the specification, but it isn't.
Yes.
Yeah. So and I get the question: should I write test cases for those parts also? And I think that I know that you're very ambitious, right? But it depends on your resources. You want to do as good job as you can do with the resources that you have. So the only thing that I sort of require from you is to write a test on the current specification. But the exploratory testing, or the activity that you did to come up with these other use cases, that should also be included, right? And the actual use cases that you produce, those are results, right? These are your findings. We need to specify a new use case, and that use case needs test cases in the next iteration, perhaps. So that would be a good result, right? Yeah. Yeah. So and I think someone found in Slack that okay, it's not that easy to start up this application, and I think this is a great result. That the application itself or the source code is not documented enough to start it up easily. So perhaps this is also a good test result. So the screenshot that I saw there, oh, it should be in your test report. This is one Explorer testing result that you have given, right? Yeah. So okay. So so it's a sort of fuzzy task, right? So how are we going to like judge if you do a good job or not? So probably different groups are going to find different defects, right? It would be a good way of telling another group that they did a good or they could do a better job if you can give them feedback on their test report, perhaps, that, oh, you didn't find this problem. since you didn't do this testing, right? That is a really good feedback to that group. You should have done more exploratory testing, or you should have done this if someone wants to do some load testing or stress testing of this. If you do stress testing, you would have found that it couldn't something, right? And I think that is a good way of learning, right? And that is good feedback to the other group. Also, the other thing is that you come up with some kind of strategy and you write it down. This is what we should do, and these are the results of that. If you cannot interpret that, if I cannot read that, or the group that is looking at your test plan, if they cannot understand how to do this, then it's a problem, right? So I want a clear specification. I want like traceability, clarity and traceability. I want to see some kind of coverage. And I also want to see that you have to at least found some of the bugs, right? Or some of the problems. Some of those are really easy and some of those are sort of hidden. Or you need to come up with creative things. And I didn't know of all these problems when I held this course. Well, when I wrote the code, at least. Yeah, so I think that there was another question that the HTTP standard contains a lot of shoulds. And you're probably, I think someone said there was over 300 different things that a web server should do, right? So you need to use your judgment. You probably not want to read all that documentation now. Perhaps that we can, if we say that we imagine this part of the project is a part of a much larger effort, right? Much larger effort. And during that entire effort, we would like all these 360 something tests to be written and executed. But during this effort that you do now for this assignment, you only want to do some part of this. You need to prioritize. And then you start to, okay, what is the most important part of the HTTP standard that we should implement first, perhaps? And then we need to look at, is this implemented? Yeah. Did that make sense? And do you think, you online, do you think that it makes sense? Do you have more questions on the second assignment? So I got a question from Rasmus that how much time should be given to task 1 and how much to task 2? Okay, time is always a problematic thing, right? You can be extremely productive and you can come up with extremely high results in short time if you know what you do, but if you don't, you might spend a lot of time doing nothing. I would say that task 1 is a bigger thing than task 2, right? In task 2, you need to like tell a story of another project's test effort. So I would say that if you can, like, okay, we have decided to work on this project, and you can tell a story for 10 minutes that is interesting about the test effort there, I think that is good enough. I mean, you can tell us about how they approach testing this. If they had a test plan, how did they? What did they cover in the test plan? What didn't they cover? So I guess that I wouldn't see task 2 as something that you would work an entire week with. I think it's 1 or 2 days of effort, right? Depending on how much work you need to do to get it started, perhaps, and stuff like that. If you're sort of not decided yet on what project to use, I think that a way to mitigate the risks of this task 2 would be to take something that is executable right now. So you don't need to build it in the entire project. I mean, if you use the Chromium browser, for instance, you can test the Chromium browser directly because you have it, right? Or you need to download it and run it. Hatim asked, do we need to write tests for task 2? No, you don't need to. I want you to use the test strategy and the test effort, the test plan if someone has written it, for that project. So, for instance, if we, let's take a look at one of the example projects, right? So I've given you a couple of example projects, and this one, for instance. So in the documentation, we can read up on how SQLite is tested, right? And it might be the same thing goes for this, right? You don't have unlimited resources. So if we read this document and then we find out, oh, they do crash testing, they do fuss testing, boundary value analysis, some of these you know and some of these you don't know. So how much of these can I do? And what kind of risks are there involved in doing this? I mean, if they are using some kind of specialized hardware, for instance, to do this test, then you cannot do it because you don't have access to that hardware. So then you need to do some other part of that. And if you're 4 different people and you spend 1 or 2 days on this, I mean, then you could probably do most of these things. I mean, running their unit test is probably an easy thing to do. On the other hand, in the Chromium project, if you choose to work on that project, just running the unit test will probably take 1 or 2 days. So perhaps in order to lower your effort, you need to prioritize once again. But I don't want you to write a test plan. I don't want you to write any test. You're just going to try to do what they did to test this product. So, yeah, I have not like read this thing, but if they do this fuss testing, then perhaps we can read up on that and try to do what they do. Can we see that in here? Or if we cannot see this, that could also be an interesting result to tell the class, right? Because if people have problems in documenting how they test things, especially in these open projects, right? If there's a problem with documenting this is an interesting finding for us, because we're right now writing our test plans, and we need to document in a clear way in order to communicate. So if they have problems of communicating, I can use that result, and that could be an interesting result. Okay, so let's imagine that we don't know how fuss testing works, and we cannot find any traces for it. Then an interesting story would be like, okay, we read their documentation, we found that they did fuss testing, they gave us a link to Wikipedia that we took a look at, and fuss testing is this, but we cannot see any examples of fuss testing in their test suites. Right? That would be an interesting finding. So perhaps, once again, I'm giving you a lot of responsibility in this assignment. And I don't expect you to kill yourself while trying to do these assignments. I want you to think it's fun. I want you to use your head. I want you to use your judgment. And if you're thinking that writing this boring document is something bad, then perhaps I want you to reflect on that. Why is this boring? Maybe some part of this template is not made for testing web servers. Maybe it's not a useful thing. Maybe I can write it in the simple way instead, right? And that would be an interesting finding again. Yes. I don't I don't view you guys as, or girls for that matter, as unintelligent drones, learning drones. I don't want to give you a book with the truth, because in the testing industry, I mean, there are a lot of books, and some of those contain some parts of the truth, but there are many truths. And it's still an active research area, so we need to be intelligent. We need to sort out the good parts. We need to do cherry picking of the things that we want to learn, and I try to give you that responsibility, right? Instead of me trying to sort out all the good things in testing and trying to give you the truth, instead I ask you to find the truth for us, right? And then we try to find the diversity of that. I mean, perhaps someone focused a lot on exploratory testing on the web server and found a lot of the defects. And perhaps they spent like, okay, I did that in 10 hours. I found all these defects in 10 hours. And some other group did a very thorough writing of manual test cases and found half of those bugs. That would be an interesting thing to compare, right? If they spent like 20 hours writing all these manual tests, it would be really interesting if exploratory testing found more problems. Or is there a mismatch, right? So we don't need to think of all these, let's say, theories and ways of doing things and boundary value analysis as the truth. I mean, there are tools and there are situations where these tools are useful and there are situations where they're not. And your problem is right now that you have not experienced using these tools, right? So you risk being in the situation where using this tool will take a lot of time for you, a lot of effort for you, right? So I guess that is one big reason for the big frustration. So, but I ask you to be intelligent and okay, think of this as you would if it was in the industry, so to speak. Okay. More questions? Yeah. And I mean, I give you these study questions for a reason. I try to guide you guys into finding things and to think of what is good and what is bad. Okay. So, okay, I got a question from Imad. For supplementary specification, where I should include. If I want to say test case equals data specific and each iteration should be exactly the same, I will use this supplementary specification in a test case. But if I want to use all in test plan, also it works here. How can I know exactly where to use? I'm actually not sure what you're asking. Could you please? Yeah. Okay. So you've been given a supplementary specification, and I get to ask where should I put these requirements from the supplementary specification? So one part of the supplementary specification is, for instance, that the server should work on different operating systems. Once again, you probably, or I don't know, but you may not have access to all of these operating systems within your group. So these requirements should produce test cases in some matter, right? Perhaps all of the test cases, or at least some of the test cases, should be run on free platforms now. So in order to say that a startup of the web server test case, or if we have a startup test case of the web server, suddenly we need to run that test case on free platforms. And perhaps also, I mean, Windows has a lot of versions. I mean, Linux also, right? So we need to decide once again. And I think it's totally fine to say that this iteration we only test on Windows, and we only test on Windows 7 or something like that, or 10. And in the future, we need to buy a Mac or something like that, or Linux computer or something like that to test that. I think that is a good idea to limit yourself. You're asking where to include the actual supplementary specification. So the supplementary specification is in the requirement document, right? So you don't need to include or include everything in the test plan, for instance, but the supplementary specification, the requirements there need to be tested. So the test effort and the traceability to the requirements should be in the test plan. So it could be, for instance, be that if we decide on, as a test strategy, that each test case must be run on all free platforms, we write that. And then in our test report, perhaps we have TC for test case, and then we have some kind of number. And perhaps we have some traceability link number that says that it's, I don't know if it's technical requirement or something like that. And then we have some other number or whatever. Does not really matter. You can have much better names, of course. But suddenly you have Windows, Linux, and then you also have your Mac, right? And then we have, okay, this worked here. And perhaps you have not available and these other things, right? And this would be the test report, right? Showing that, okay, it worked for this one. And perhaps if you have it available, you could have like, okay, it didn't work on Windows, but it worked on Linux, right? So I get the question, what should be in the test report? So, and I get the question if it's okay for it just to contain the actual results, or do we need to have more things? Okay, once again, you need to like imagine who is going to receive this test report and what are they going to do with it, right? Because depending on who's going to receive that report, we need to have different things in it. So perhaps you say that, and you decide, right? You decide this test report is for management, like the project management. They need to know how the testing goes, and they need to see that you've done a good job and what parts of the project they need to spend more money on. If that's the case, okay, what kind of information do they need to make their judgments? Okay, maybe they need these table just to get an overview, right, over all the tests that I've run that shows that you have done a good job. But they don't need the detailed information on how to reproduce a bug, right? And then you have some kind of, okay, these are my comments, or these are the things that we think needs to be addressed for the management group below. So you do a bit of discussion. You say that, okay, for the next iteration, we need to make sure that we fully understand the HTTP standard, and that will take resources. We estimate that resources to be 80 hours of work, something like that. That would be a good test report for the management. And perhaps you need to write this in the test report also. This test report is going to be used by the management, and therefore we communicate to those. If the test report is going to be communicated to the developer, they want other kind of information. They want to see that, oh, it didn't work on Windows. What version of Windows did you use? What didn't work? What was the error message? Oh, you didn't get any log files written on Mac. So where did you put it? Did you give write permissions there? What could be the problem? Or if you have a specific test, what did you input? And what was the output? Maybe a screenshot also. If it totally crashed memory, I mean, if you get a blue screen, maybe a memory dump of the entire thing would be, okay, this was uploaded to this location. You have a link to this memory dump here, right? Whatever the developer wants. But you decide, who is the receiver of this document? I think that the last part is probably what you want to do, right? If you're imagining yourself like a developer, probably you need to think of what would I need as a developer to do a good thing here to be able to proceed. Okay, so I also got a question. Free for risks, how can I give correct priorities? Any static rules, high, low, maybe brainstorm. Okay, so how you prioritize your test cases, or how you prioritize what to do? I'm not sure what you're asking. Okay. So Imad asked me how to grade this, and you will be graded on the different artifacts that you hand in, but also your comments on the other project, right? So I mean, I will grade on coverage. I want to see coverage. If I can clearly see coverage, that is a good way, right? I want to see traceability. If I can clearly see traceability, that is a good thing. I want to be able to read your test plan, for instance. If it's if I can understand it, that is a good thing. I'm not going to grade you on finding bugs or not finding bugs. I'm not going to grade you on, but because that could be totally random, right? You decided what to do, and that got a result. One of the things that I always grade is that, okay, everything that I ask for, all the artifacts are there, and then a little bit on the effort, right? If you write 100 test cases, you put a lot of effort. That should show up also, right? But if all these 100 test cases are just copy-pasted with different input, but for the same category, I mean that is not a good thing. For the task 2. I guess that it's sort of hard to grade A to F. I mean, it clearly depends on, I would say that it's either you have done it or you don't, right? And perhaps that we can see that it's sort of hard to see. If you didn't test another project, or you didn't, you can always find nothing when you're searching, right? So I guess the second assignment is just do or don't, or approved or not. Yes. The third task, okay, here, if you're just going to say, oh, it's very good about what the other people have done, you didn't help them, you didn't learn anything. So I guess we can grade this on your insights, right? How good are you at sort of grading this test plan yourself, right? And without cursing, without putting ridiculous comments on things, by trying to be really helpful, right? That is the approach we should have. Okay. So we're gonna move forward to the third assignment. And this is, yes?
Just one more question because of the grading of the task 2.
Yes?
It says that there's going to be an individual examination, so is there going to be one for the second task?
So do I say that?
Scroll down. Right there, like just all of the study questions better.
Oh, okay, it's copy-paste. Sorry about that one.
Okay.
So we're not going to have an individual that was a couple of years ago, or 2 years ago. Sorry about that. So I'm going to fix that problem directly. No, I'm not, apparently. But that should be fixed, right? Okay. Okay, the third assignment. I think it's a good thing to start off and fix the goal here. The third assignment is an opportunity for you to dive into some area of interest, right? So from before, right, I have controlled you totally, sort of, have given you like open task, but on unit tests or on system testing and writing test plans and stuff like that. But this one is even fuzzier, right? So a subject of interest, but it should be within testing. So actually, I once got an individual project in this assignment that was not in the area of testing. So, but the assignment is like this. First, you need, it's a single student assignment, and you should do it individually. You're allowed to read and give feedback to each other, but it's not a part of the grading thing here. You should individually present and explain a specific study area within software testing and demonstrate theoretical insights in that area. So you need to read up on something. You need to find some area and focus on that one. You need to critically evaluate literature and other information sources in the field of testing. So, okay, in order to do that, I want you to find at least 2 papers, 2 scientific articles on testing. And they should be peer-reviewed. And you can read up on peer review if you don't know what that is. But sort of what it means is that it must be proper research. It's not popular science. It's not a post on Stack Overflow. It's some scientist who have written, or some company that have written a report on some area of interest, right? And I actually give a few restrictions here. I want it to be published in a peer-reviewed journal or conference. Okay. And I've given you 2 databases here, IEEE Explorer and ACM. And you have access to this database through the university. So you need to be online on the university's net in order to access these. But let's look at the ACM, for instance. I mostly collect my my articles on ACM, and we have a search box up here, and you might need to write a more complex search term, but let's just search for test-driven development. And we find a lot of results. I mean, there are 131,000 papers on this in this subject, right? And I don't want you to read all of those. I just want you to find 2 that are interesting. So now I've clicked one of these. I just took the topmost one. And I think that this is one of the things that you should look at. And this is where this is published. In this case, it is a workshop. And actually, I'm totally fine with workshop also. But it should say here that it has been published in a conference or in a journal. Sometimes there are several places that the same paper has been published in. But I guess that workshops are also okay. I'm just going to take the next one to see if that is. Okay, so this one has been published on a conference. So a peer-reviewed paper, the process is like this. The conference, the people who are organizing the conference, or they ask scientists to send in their papers. And the scientists write the papers and send them in. And then there is the peer review process. And that is where the conference makes sure that this paper is sent to a couple of experts in the area, in the field that this paper is written in. And those experts anonymously give feedback and recommend the paper to be published or not. If enough of these agree that it should be published, and then it's published, right? Then we say that it's higher value, right? Someone, an expert or a couple of experts, has said that this paper or this article it's worth reading. Yeah. So, and that is why I want you to have peer-reviewed papers, right? Because peer-reviewed papers should have a little bit of higher standard. I mean, it's not always that they do. There are actually very many peer-reviewed papers that don't have high standard. There are like fraud conferences and fraud journals. There are these journals that just publish scientists' papers, and if they get money for it, right? But I don't want you to you don't need to judge if this is a good journal or a good conference. If it's on ACM or IEEE Explore, then I'm totally fine with it, right? But at least you should take a look at, is this really published? Is this a sort of proper paper? And then you read these papers, and some of these are pretty hard to read. This is the looks of most scientific papers in ACM. So these look like they have an abstract. That is a short story that tells us what this paper is about, what they did, and also a short thing about the results and their conclusions. So it's sammanfattning, summary, yeah, short summary. And then almost every research paper, I don't say that this one is because I just opened it, right? Almost every research paper is a story. And that story goes from background, what happened before, and then they say that, okay, in this world that we have before this paper, we saw this problem or this opportunity, something that needs to be changed, right? And then they present what they want to change. In this case, they have some kind of research goals. I don't know if this is good paper, but sometimes they say that, okay, this is our problem statement or something like that. It could be a research question, is TDD better than other agile testing techniques or something like that? And after they have found that, okay, this is a goal, or this is a problem that we're working, or this is a question we wanted to answer, then they have some kind of method. And in this one, they call it an approach. This was a really short paper. Yeah, you should probably want to avoid such short papers. Yeah, it's page 240, but that is because this is in the conference proceedings. So it's one paper in the conference, and the conference publishes a proceeding. So this was probably not the best paper to look at. That is what happens when you so let's take a look at the next one. I think that we should take a look at the next one either. So one way of trying to judge if this is a good paper or not is to look at this one, bibliometrics, citation counts. This means that other researchers have found this valuable and needed to say something about this paper in relation to that. Perhaps in their background, they say that current research says this and that, and then they reference this paper. So they cite this paper. And if they have a lot of citations, I mean, 28, it's not super many, but it's at least more than the other papers. So let's take a look at that one. This was published on an international symposium, and it's from 2006. But I mean, 28 people have found it valuable so far. So once again, we can see that there's some kind of background or introduction that should place this paper. And then they have more information on TDD and whatever that is. And then they give even more information on what have people done before. And all of that information is like a background story on why this is important. And I guess this is their method. I didn't really see a problem, but this is their method, I guess, that they do some kind of industrial case study. They study something at IBM. And then they have some academic studies, and then they tell us, okay, what they do, and then they actually tell us what they have done, right? These different case studies, this was a little bit longer, and I guess these tables are actually their results. So what these scientists produced, their test output, so to speak, test result. So they did something, and they give some values about something. They produce some results. And then after that, they also discuss what problems is there if you think that this result is the truth. How much of the truth is in these results? And that is called validity. So for instance, if I do science and I do a couple of experiments with students. So last year we did an experiment in this course where we tested if unit tests are better suited for documentation than just source code comments, normal specification of a class. And students needed to implement the right code, and then we measured how long did that take, right? We're not going to do this this year, even if it was an interesting experience. But a problem with this experiment that I did was that, okay, I did it with students. This means that if these students is a special group, then I cannot say that the result from that single experiment would apply for any programmer, right? Because I didn't try the experiment on any programmer. So I only tested on students. It might be applicable and a valid result for students. Might still be that, right? So they need to discuss what problems is there with our results. And we can see that they have 3 different problems. I'm not going to go into those, right? After they said something about the problems, then they say that what they see, right? So they tell us, okay, we saw these results, and these are our conclusions for that. And they hopefully answer their research question using these results. Okay. You can see that they have a reference list also, right? So these are the studies, the other studies, and there are actually more of those, 16 at least, that they have based their research on. It could be related work, it could be part of the background or something like that. So each of these articles is a part of a bigger story, a longer story, from background and leads into the future, right? So each scientist is trying to read up on a specific area, and then they try to do some, then they identify a problem there, and then they try to do some research and find out some solution or more about the problem or how the world is, really. And then they present that result, and then other scientists can use that result further on, right? So it's, each paper is a link in a research. So one way of approaching this assignment that you're supposed to do is to take two papers that are linked. So you find one interesting paper, and then you see that this interesting paper references some other paper, and they say that, oh, this other scientists have done something similar. Because then it makes much easier for you to build your own story on this, and you will find two papers that is about the same thing. So, just to give you some hints on how to do that, on this page, you can see that all the references, the 16, are also stated here, and with direct links, so you can easily find them, right? But you can also find who have been using this paper. So this one has 28 citations, right? So all the citations. So if I click on this other one, we can see that this paper also cited the one we read before, right? So that is one way of finding interesting papers. And I usually only read the title and the abstract first, and then I decide if I want to read the entire paper. Otherwise, I mean, there are 131,000 papers on test-driven development, or that at least show up in their search results, right? So I don't want you to browse through all of those and read all of those papers before you decide. You need, once again, to prioritize. Okay, I want to find out more about test-driven development. I choose these papers that have most citations, whatever. Okay, are we allowed to use video conferences as well, like James Bach? No, so because James Bach's lecture is not a peer-reviewed lecture, right? There is no one who said that what he said during this lecture is the truth. But in some case, I mean, if you have this paper, no idea what this paper is, I just opened the link, right? If you have found this paper, maybe you can find a presentation for this paper also, and you can like understand more of it by reading the presentation. But really, if we take a look at the assignment, what I want from you is that you should write a little story, 2 to 4 pages, and this story should analyze 2 peer-reviewed papers, so two such articles, at least two articles. And you should answer these questions about these articles. And as always, sometimes these articles don't contain all the answers for these questions. So, but at least most should be like this. What are the main research questions? What problem are the authors trying to solve, right? So I just want you to read the paper. Okay, try to understand what kind of problem do they want to solve. Do they have any sub-questions? Okay, maybe you can say those also. And then you tell us about, okay, what kind of method did they use to answer this question? And then you tell us a little bit on their results. And then you see, okay, what does this researcher say about their results? How valid are those results? What is the validity of these results? And there are specific words that are sometimes used, like external and internal validity. And in order to understand those, you might need to Google on those words, right? Scientists use a specific language, so yeah. And then here are sort of the conclusions. And all I'm asking, really, is for you to extract this information and then you write it in your story, right? and also a bit on their future work, right? Sometimes it could be interesting if the paper is like from 2006, we can actually look at their future work, right? Because it's also published. So you can choose that, okay, I looked at a paper from 2006 and then I looked at their paper from 2014. And that could also produce an interesting story. And the last part, and this requires a little more intelligence, so to speak, from your behalf, is that I want you to write a short discussion on these two papers. What do you think about those papers and why do you think that? The only thing that I want you to think of when you write this discussion is that I don't want this to be tinfoil hat evidence things. I want you to build your claims. If you make a claim like test-driven development is always better, I mean, then you need to support that claim. So if you discuss this article and say that, okay, these articles or the researchers in these articles are obviously not into test-driven development and they have like manipulated their results to or something like that. I mean, you're allowed to, in your discussion, you're allowed to say things, what you think here, but then you need to support those claims. I think they have manipulated their results because no one would do a test-driven development on such a project, whatever. I mean, but it should make sense. I have some requirements on this. And this is something that you need to check up on. Most students don't know what citations are, and some don't know what paraphrasing is. So I'm just going to go through it very fast today. So a direct citation is where I take the words from another scientist and I say them myself, right? And you almost never do that. It's only if they have, in Swedish we say bevingade ordspråk, winged words. Weird translation, right? But if their words are really important, then you would do that. But then you put these words with citation marks, right? And you also cite those so that I can find the actual source of this citation. The other way to do this is to paraphrase, and that is what we most commonly use. So I'm going to see if we can find perhaps some paraphrasing. So let's take a look at this first sentence. They say that test-driven development, TDD, is a software development process used in industry. So they're making a claim. They say that test-driven development is used in the industry, right? In order for another scientists that are critical to believe them, they provide evidence that this is used in the industry. And that is this citation. They didn't say here a direct citation. They didn't say that someone else said that with quotation marks or citation marks, but they did a paraphrasing. They interpreted this other article, number 10, in this way. So, and that is what I want you to do also, right? So if we take a look at number 10, and no idea what this is, and read that paper, we should be able to come up with the same conclusion. If we do, then we trust that TDD is used in the software industry. Does it make sense? So sort of, we're trying to show evidence of things, right? And most of these citations and paraphrasing is done in the introduction and background. And you can see that there are a lot of these citation marks here. But in their own study, I'm not sure, in their own results and what they have done, they're not citing so many people, right? They are producing their own results here. So that is what they say. That is what I could cite if I wanted to. But it's very important that your essay use this proper citation. So that you clearly, if you make a claim, or if you say that some paper says something, or that some paper has a claim about reality, then you cite that paper. There are ways that we did that, and in this, you can see that there was these magical numbers somewhere, like this, number 15, and that is a reference to the reference list on number 15. So I actually met Spacco this summer, but that was totally incidental. Okay, that was fun. He was a nice guy. But there are other ways of writing these citations. So we're gonna take a look at the APA style. And this is another way of writing these. And the reason that I posted this one instead is because this OWL guide is really good at giving us or telling you about how to cite things. So, for instance, here they give examples, but you can see that here they give the names of the author, often the last name, I guess, and the year of it's published. And here they have a direct citation with these quotation marks, and with direct quotations they also give the page number so that we can easily find the source of that statement, right? They also have this, you can read up on APA style, and there are more information on APA style here, but I don't require you to use all of the APA style for the entire document. I just want the citations, right? But if you choose to use the other citation system, I think it's Harvard system or something like that, I don't mind. So you decide the citation system. Yes. Okay, but you should use a referencing system. You can reference the referencing system so that I know how to judge that right. Okay. So the grading will be on these 5 different things. I want you to use a peer-reviewed paper within the area of testing, right? You should read that and understand that. Both papers must be in the area of testing, and they should be peer-reviewed. You should do proper citation and references on these ones. This was actually one of the more problematic things last year. I mean, like 50% of the students did direct citation without giving any source for this, right? Copy-pasting things from someone else. And that is actually cheating instead, right? So we don't want to do that. I actually didn't report these students because I wanted to give them an opportunity to fix the problem, because I think that this is a problematic thing that students don't know how to cite. And soon you're going to write reports in other courses also. Perhaps you're going to write your thesis, and then you need to know these things, and you need to have a citation system. So that is one of the reasons that we're doing this. Okay, the third thing that I'm going to try to judge, right, and this is that you have a critical standpoint, that you can discuss the validity of what they're saying. You're not accepting what they're saying as the truth. You have a critical viewpoint. You say that, okay, they have a good validity discussion, whatever, and I find their claims to be valuable in this area, but not in the other area, something like that. And also, I will judge the essay style and language. So I want you to write proper Swedish or proper English. This was actually one of the more problematic things for me last year, that some of the students had a hard time writing, so I had a hard time understanding what they wrote, right? So, and this is something that you can help each other with, since I'm asking for short essays, right? I only want you to it's better to have something short that is good than something long that is bad, right? And then you can read each other's assignments, but I don't force you to do that. Yeah. And the fifth one is that I want to see that you've understood. When you discuss this, I want to see that you've understood what they said and that you have something to say of yourself according to this, right? Of course, if you aim for the higher grades, you could have more peer-reviewed papers within this area. Okay, will there be a written exam in the end of the course? No, these free assignments are sort of the exams, right? So you have 3 different exams in this course. The first one is the test-driven one. The second one is a peer review process, right? So you give each other feedback. And the third one is that you hand in this article that you write. And you're not allowed to copy other people's articles. It must be your own individual work. You're allowed to cite these papers or other papers, but they should be peer-reviewed. And you can see here that this should be emailed to my Urkund address. And Urkund is a tool that we use to find students who are just copy-pasting from someone else, right? And it can find similarities even if you rewrite things. So it's very good. It's very obvious if someone did a lot of direct citations without citing. Yes. So in the end of the course, the last lecture, we will have 10 to 15 minutes oral report per student, right? So a short presentation of what you have found. And I mean, this last part is, a lot of people seem to dread this. And I think it's really important to share. A big part of learning is to tell other people what you've learned yourself, right? Most of the things that I base my lectures on are things that I've learned. And I sort out the things that are not important because I don't want to waste your time. So I want to focus on that. And that sorting out is what I want you to do here also. You're going to think of what is interesting for my colleagues, the other students, to know. David, you had a question, perhaps?
No, I just wondered if is that a video we record or we present it live?
Will we present live or do a video recording? I think that I'm not sure. Did I write on the deadlines, perhaps? Yeah, here. Maybe pre-recorded films. Yes. Yeah, so you can do a pre-recorded film if you're especially nervous about standing up here or something like that. And yeah. I know that there are always some students who are really nervous about oral presentations, right? And I think that one of the things that we can do is either this one or to have a really supportive environment when people are standing in front of the class, right? But I mean, these can be done online also. So I guess that for most of the people who are doing this online, it's easier to produce a movie. There are always some technical difficulties to do these online presentations, but we will do those if we have to. Or I think those are more interesting. So, sorry? Yeah. So live is more fun to watch than a video, right? But I think that producing such a video and perhaps cut it down to like, okay, if we cut it down to 10 minutes, and you cut out all the uninteresting parts and you work a bit with that, and then you do a live presentation after that, because doing this video presentation is a good way of practicing. Yeah. So I've noticed it myself because I've done a couple of these lectures, you know. And one time we were unable to broadcast a lecture like today, and I had to record one. And all my, I think there was 3 recordings that failed. The first one was like the sound quality was too low, and the second one, the sound sped up. and the third one worked. And then I've done the same presentation 4 times within 1 day or something like that. So the 4th time was much better than the other ones, right? Because I practiced. So yes. For us who are in Växjö, do we need to come to Kalmar, or is it okay to stick with the YouTube videos? You're very welcome here in Kalmar, but you can stick with the YouTube video or do the presentation live. Yes. Okay. I think we're going to take a break now, so because we have worked for like 70 minutes. So we'll take a short break, and if you have more questions, we will discuss those questions after the break. Let's take 5 minutes and be back past 10, and then I will answer more questions. Okay, I'm trying to do a test case of a use case in the assignment, and I'm wondering how do I try to access a file that is outside the shared container. Going to localhost :xx some folder just looks for some folder inside the shared resource. So one way of doing that would be to share a folder. You share a folder, and then you have some files below that shared folder in the same file system. And then you put 2 dots in the URL. So using ... in the URL is a link to a file that is lower, right? Yeah, you say you tried ... in URL, it does not work. Okay, so you probably cannot access that file. So I mean, according to what we know right now, we cannot access that. So maybe it actually works, that requirement, right? So that is the test result. So the /./ is your test input. Okay, but it does not throw the 403 forbidden. Yeah. Okay, so that is the test result once again, right? So it didn't throw the 400 feet forbidden, so we cannot. Yes. So that is also a test result. And there are problems with this web server. I mean, it's probably not HTTP compliant and other things. So yes. Okay, any more questions? Yes?
About the third task,
The third task about the report, yes?
Said it was trying to discard shorter reports because of the validity yes, but if there's like, let's say it's like a 4 to 5 page report, like this has we're about to write, and it's like 20 citations, could it still be valid to use?
So I get the question if shorter reports that have many citations are still valid to use. Yes, I think so. It's just that some of the shorter reports are just 1 page, and they do not contain the answer of all these questions, right? So but maybe you can include that also if it includes some important aspect. I mean, if they have some kind of important finding that you want to cite or that you want to reference to, then you include that also. But I think that the 2 reference papers should probably be a bit larger. I don't want to put a number on it. I mean, once again, the same thing goes as for the assignment 2, the size of the project. It's up to you. Yeah. And it might be that, okay, I'm aiming for high grade. So to ensure that I do a good job, okay, I do 5 papers. I look at 5 articles, and I compare these, and I see if they have the same question or working on different things, and I compare the results here. Yeah. The more advanced you create this, I mean, an interesting way, a way of doing science yourself in this essay would be to do a meta-study. A meta-study is just not, you don't create any results yourself, you're just combining the results of other people, and then you make conclusions for that, right? So I mean, that would be a beautiful way of achieving A in this assignment. Yes. And if you can do that in 2 to 4 pages, that is awesome. Okay. So any more questions, or we take the day off, or continue with our work with the assignments, I guess. Okay, thank you very much for all your questions. Yes.